For more than 20 years, one enormous prison in West Berlin had a single inmate, watched over by guards from 4 different countries. How Rudolf Hess ended up with an entire prison around him, and why even the governments asking for his release couldn't get him out, begins with one of the strangest decisions made by any senior Nazi during the Second World War. Every day, an old man walks through Spandau prison in West Berlin as guards posted along the prison walls watch him closely. His life became a routine that has not changed in years. Around him stands a prison designed for hundreds of inmates, but every other prisoner has already gone. The guards remain, the warders remain, and 4 governments continue sharing responsibility for the place, rotating control from one country to another every month. Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union are deep into the Cold War by now. But here in Spandau, they are still running the same prison together. And the prison has one inmate. His name is Rudolf Hess, and one of the closest men to Adolf Hitler. He has already been in captivity for more than 3 decades, and his story began long before this empty prison. Landsberg, 1924. The not yet famous Adolf Hitler is serving a sentence in Landsberg prison after a failed putsch, and Rudolf Hess is imprisoned there with him. Hess had joined Hitler's movement early and became one of his devoted followers, remaining close to him during the years when the Nazi Party was still fighting for political relevance. During their imprisonment, Hess assists Hitler while he works on the manuscript that becomes Mein Kampf, and their relationship continues after both men get out of prison. Hitler rebuilds his movement, and his influence grows, while Hess rises with him. Hess becomes Hitler's private secretary and eventually deputy leader of the Nazi Party, placing him among the senior figures of the regime. But when the Second World War begins, his position starts slipping. Other men around Hitler are becoming increasingly important to the war effort, while Hess finds himself with less influence than before. Early in 1941, apparently hoping to achieve something dramatic, Hess begins preparing a mission of his own. May 10th, 1941. For a mysterious reason, Rudolf Hess decides to climb into a Messerschmitt plane and takes off. Alone. He flies north across Germany and continues north, heading toward a country that Nazi Germany has been fighting for almost 2 years. Britain. Hess spends hours flying north until he finally reaches Scotland. Running out of fuel, he jumps from the plane and opens his parachute. The Messerschmitt crashes into the ground nearby. Hess lands in Scotland and is quickly detained, but nobody yet knows why Hitler's deputy has just flown alone into enemy territory. Hess asks to meet the Duke of Hamilton, and soon claims that he has come to talk about peace. The British listen to what he has to say, but there will be no peace talks. Hess is now a prisoner of Britain. The reaction from Berlin comes quickly. The Nazi leadership disowns the mission, presenting Hess as having acted without Hitler's authorization. British officials question him, but the peace mission goes nowhere. Britain refuses the proposal, while Hess remains in custody. A flight he apparently hoped would restore his political importance has instead ended his career, and he will never return to Nazi Germany. Hess spends the rest of the war as a British prisoner, while the regime he served continues without him. Nuremberg, November 1945. Nazi Germany has collapsed, and Hitler is dead. And the surviving senior leaders of the regime are brought before the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. Hess is sitting among them, alongside major Nazi figures. Hermann Göring, Hitler's designated successor and Luftwaffe chief, Karl Donitz, head of the German Navy and briefly Hitler's successor as head of state, and Albert Speer, Hitler's architect and later armaments minister. After long court hearings, including where Hess would appear to have nervous breakdowns, the tribunal finds Hess guilty of conspiracy and crimes against peace and sentences him to life imprisonment. In July 1947, Hess and 6 other convicted Nazi leaders are transferred to Spandau prison in Berlin, where they begin serving their sentences. Hess receives the designation Prisoner Number 7, a number that will follow him for the next 40 years. Spandau is run under an unusual arrangement. Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union share responsibility for the prison, with control rotating every month. The arrangement was created by countries that had just fought a war together. But that alliance is already coming apart. Germany is divided. Berlin is divided. Relations between Moscow and the West are deteriorating, and the Cold War is taking shape around the prison walls. Yet Spandau keeps functioning under the old agreement, with Soviet and Western personnel replacing each other, month after month. The 7 prisoners grow older, and over the years, their numbers begin to fall. Some finish their sentences. Others are released because of their health, and Spandau becomes quieter with every departure. Rudolf Hess remains inside. He is 72 years old when Spandau becomes his prison alone. The guards continue arriving every month, despite the fact that there is nobody left for Hess to share the prison with. During each country's month of responsibility, the military guard alone includes an officer and 28 soldiers. Warders remain on duty. Governors represent each of the 4 powers. Medical officers are assigned to the prison, and the entire structure continues operating around Hess. Year after year, British, American, French, and Soviet personnel rotate through Spandau, maintaining an institution whose population has fallen to 1. Hess grows older, and his conditions gradually become less restrictive, allowing him more freedom to move through parts of the prison and spend time in its garden. Then the situation becomes even more peculiar, because some of the countries guarding him begin trying to get him released. Britain had already started raising the possibility of releasing Hess on humanitarian grounds, and the United States and France eventually support repeated approaches to Moscow. The Soviet Union refuses, and the same disagreement returns again and again over the following years. Hess became Spandau's sole prisoner in 1966, and he remains there as the years outside the walls accumulate. Men walk on the moon. The Vietnam War ends. Governments change across Europe and America, while the Cold War enters entirely new phases. By the 1980s, Hess is approaching 90, more than 4 decades removed from the flight that brought him to Britain. On August 17, 1987, Rudolf Hess dies inside Spandau at 93, ending 46 years of captivity. Soon after, the prison is demolished, partly to stop it becoming a gathering place for neo-Nazi supporters. Hess had spent more than 20 years there as the only prisoner, while 4 rival powers kept the prison alive because they could never agree on his release. Once Hess was gone, Spandau had no reason to remain, and the prison disappeared with him.